We are live we are live, and I'm taking care of some technical stuff on my end over here. So let's see.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Okay, wonderful. We're just going to go forward. So yes, welcome to today's Elevate series. My name is Tziporah, and from supportintimacy.com. I am here today as your host and ambassador to, it is episode 10 of our live stream Elevate series. And I'm really thrilled today to have Dr. Eva Brown back in the house, back on our panel. I know, woo-hoo. She is a couples and intimacy specialist, and I know she has tagged the name with her tribe, the relationship revolutionaries. And we're going to get into that as we converse today. And in a moment, I'm going to pass it over to Eva so she can talk a little bit more about herself and her work in the world. But before we go there, I just want to share a little bit about this series. And the Elevate series was originally created by a friend and leader in the marketing industry, Amber Vilhauer, from NG Enterprises. And I was so impressed by the Elevate series she created. She had then sent out an invitation to a group of people. I was on that list. And the invitation was, wow, do we want to become an ambassador? And what that meant was taking the lead and actually starting our own theme, our own sense of the series. And I sat with that. And, at first, my gut was just like, hell yes, I want to do this. This is exciting. And then I was just like, I had no clue. I was just like, how am I going to bring this together? And now that we are on episode 10, and it just is continuing to grow. And I find this collective intention here is bringing together impactful, inspiring, and real conversations from various leaders around the world. However, also sharing kind of like our best tips and practices, our own personal journey, our own personal edges, what we've learned from, and leaving you with a space where you as the viewer are able to maybe feel a bit more grounded, more centered, have some practices for your own relationships or health and well-being and home life. And so today we're going to dive into this conversation on everything under the sun: relationship, intimacy, soulful sex, and everything that comes to us just simply flowing with the organic nature of it. So I want to hand it over to Eva and just ask you to share with the viewers today more about your work and what got you into your work.
Yeah, so a little bit of redo of last week, right? Now,
yes.
So let's see. Maybe we'll give the fun version this time, right? So I did start my education, my career in education in terms of sexuality. In my 20s, I was in passion parties for about 10 years. I became an executive director pretty quickly, and I absolutely loved working with the ladies and leading the team and so forth. But one of the things that was happening in the ordering rooms is that women were not really showing any satisfaction in their relationships, right? And about, probably 60% of them ended up crying in the ordering room when I would, try to talk to them about what might be helpful for spicing up the bedroom. And what I found is that a lot of them were having troubles with communication issues, intimacy issues, sexual blocks. And so I just really felt inadequate at the time to be able to serve them on a bigger level. And so what I decided to do is go get my education first and really figure out like, hey, how can I help best support couples? And so that's how I got my master's. And I can't believe I went all the way to the PhD because I didn't want to do research. And that wasn't something that I wanted to do. Although I enjoyed the research project, I didn't enjoy the hours. I did not enjoy the tireless nights of sitting at my computer and sifting through data upon data and so forth. But it really helped me get a very keen idea of the interconnected dynamics that happen between couples in relationships, because you really need to have, in my opinion, an advanced eye to see all the dynamics at play, because there's so many. I mean, we're talking about communication, we're talking about intimacy, we're talking about sexuality, we're talking about traumas, because a lot of our triggers, the emotional triggers that happen in our relationships, come from those traumas that happen way before in the relationship. And also, you're dealing with two people at the same time, and two people that are oftentimes not in agreement about how things are flowing in their lives, right? So that's why I went on and I tried to really make sure that I had a good eye for it. And now, thankfully, after all the education, now I'm really kind of getting into the flow of creating different types of things for couples now that I've been doing it for 12 years. I kind of have my own formulas that I've been able to kind of work out and figure out how to best serve them, and create a book and do some other things like that, not just do private practice work. And we created an online program for couples that is like a 90-day program where couples can really learn how to advance their skills in all areas, not just on some. And so that's pretty much my journey over the past, I don't know, 15, seems like longer, years.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for recapping. For those of you who weren't here last week, Eva was on a panel discussion with us when we focused a lot on the way trauma impacts our life, our nervous system, and our relationships. So thank you for coming back on board, and excited for the topics we're going to get into today.
Me too.
So yeah, and today I'm going to share just a wee bit about myself, and then some fun stuff that's happening as we go live. So as I said, my business is supportintimacy.com. I am an intimacy and relationship educator now for nearly 2 decades. I'm the author of the book called Revolutionizing Intimacy: Navigating Connection in a Disconnected World. And I love building bridges. I love working with individuals, couples, as well as organizations to kind of help them. I see intimacy and compassion as the bridge. And so through intimacy and compassion, we build bridges so they can not only have the skills and the tools, but also this deep felt sense of how to access um, real deeper, thriving human connection on the planet in their own personal world, as well as elevate their relationship dynamics. But again, it all comes back to a felt sense in the way that I work, a very embodied approach. And so as we talk today, for those of you listening, today I decided, I was just like, let's see if we can inspire in some Q&A. And so we're going to toss that in the mix as we get towards the latter part of our conversation. For you listening, is that if you want to type in your questions in the comments, everyone gets a free gift from me. You're going to get a copy of a digital version of my book, Revolutionizing Intimacy. But type in your questions so we can toss them at us and spice up our conversation maybe a little bit. So Eva.
Yes.
I want to, when I reflect on your work and I think about revolutionary, the relationships theme, and then I think of my book, Revolutionizing Intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious that I know when I think of intimacy, the whole theme came to me about revolutionizing it was that it wasn't this closed in only component of intimacy meant I had to be in physical contact with a partner or another person, that it only meant sexual connection, or it only meant, so many I know in the world can relate intimacy to touch or sex, or I have to be in contact with a human being. So my idea of intimacy is where we can apply all these practices that I know we're going to go into and talk about, and create this change internally in our own nervous system, shifting those past ideas and programming somatically in our body. So intimacy becomes something we feel as a quality in everything we do, from the way that we talk, from the way, sure, that we touch, from the way that we walk, through nature in a park, from the way we maybe sit with our elders, or from the way we wash dishes. And when it comes to like sex, I see sex as an action, and we can have sex, obviously, mechanically, without any form of intimacy whatsoever, if we're still moving from that place of emotional armoring or protection or hiding that sense of vulnerability. So that's my take on intimacy, liking to give it a broader view. I'm curious when it comes to your work with the tribe, revolutionary relationships, what your view is and how you bring that into play.
Yeah. I love the conversation about intimacy because intimacy has so many different aspects to it. When people think about it, it's sexual. Intimacy can be spiritual. Intimacy can be through communication, how you guys communicate. I think what I can add to because I don't think it's very different than what you just mentioned, really, just really that there's so many different aspects of it. The idea of revolutionizing your relationship is that it's more of a macro mission. I think it is. It's not just on a micro level where you're just revolutionizing one relationship at a time. I envision a world where couples are always in an evolving state in their relationship because you're going to change anyway, right? You're going to change, you're going to grow, you're going to get new biases, new prejudices, new belief systems, and some of them are similar from when you were in your 20s, but some of them shift and change. Also, our bodies change, the way we think about things change. And so for me, I think the key component of revolutionizing relationships entirely is moving from this surviving relationship style, which is, I find, what 80% of the world is doing. They're getting married and they don't have a map or a toolkit for how to manage a marriage and how to manage conflict and how to go deeper with your emotional intimacy and how that leads to your sexual intimacy, right? Because everything is systemically connected. And so when I think about revolutionizing relationships, it's about a mission, really, on a micro and macro level, going back to that concept again, where you're looking at moving from that surviving, struggling, and trust me, in the surviving relationships, the reason why they can get to 10, 15, 20 years is because there are happy moments. These couples love themselves. They love each other. They love their children. And they just don't know what they don't know. I literally was talking to a woman on the phone right before I jumped on the call today. And we were having this conversation, and she's been married for 5 years and she has 2 children. And then she decided she was going to leave, a year ago, and she's madly in love with him still. And he's madly in love with her, but they can't get along. They can't figure out how to get that intimacy going because the communication is broken, right? They're scapegoating, they're blaming, they're cross-complaining, they're projecting, they're not taking accountability. And all of those tools that I'm talking about right now are the things that I think about when it comes to really revolutionizing the relationships across the world, right? Not just here in Florida, but everywhere, how we can move from surviving to proactive and then to what I call the ever evolving relationship. So I have 3 different ways of describing that, right? So surviving to the proactive partnership, and the proactive partnership, to Tziporah, it's like, I love my proactive couples. They come in, they're like, we have a problem and I want it fixed right now. And then they get it fixed and then they move on. And then eventually, they don't do any other maintenance things, right? And then eventually they get to a step point again. Because the thing is, guys, we have so many things that we have to manage at one time, right? We have the spiritual, the communication, the intimacy, the sexual. There's so many elements on top of our regular lives, right? On top of taking the dog out, taking the kids, and going to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. You know what I mean? It's like, and our own purpose, our own mission, our own passion. I mean, I know my husband and I are super passionate people, obviously. So we have so many different things. So what I'm really envisioning when I think about this, and I think we're on the same page, is this concept of being the ever evolving relationship where you continue this growth culture of change in your relationship over time. And you enjoy it. Like you enjoy the process. It doesn't have to be one of those things that you're like, your head's down, you're walking into a couple's office, a couple's therapist's office, like, oh, I think we're probably going to get a divorce. Don't do that. Like it can be fun. My husband and I work with couples. I work with 25 couples a week. And I go to couples retreats. I go to workshops because I want to be led. I don't want to lead my own marriage all the time. I like to be in the containers where I can learn and I can grow and I can learn about my own sexuality. I mean, I had so many evolutions in my own intimacy and my own sexuality. And it's so cool when you're doing it with a partner, because guess what? As you're doing it, they're doing it, and then you end up with this growth that's just amazing. And in 20 years, it doesn't look like the same relationship it did when you got married. It's 10 times better. And sex is better. Everything.
Yes. Wow. I'm taking notes. There's so many points. I'm like, oh, I want to go there. I want to go there. I want to go there. So the one thing that I want to chime into is towards the end that you shared is the idea of having a therapist. And I'm going to say that I am so pro. I feel every relationship wants to have some form of therapist, space holder at the beginning of the relationship. It's not an idea that we go when it's broken and there's something wrong, but like, I love your idea of the celebration of it. My partner and I have this beautiful, wonderful therapist. She's a somatic therapist in Canada. Yeah. And she actually gets very entertained. Like she's laughing and in bliss at the end of our sessions because because they're so elevated versus, like you said, walking in angst of what's going to happen. Yet why don't we, the idea is stepping forward before that. So we're constantly in the space of getting to know ourselves, getting to know each other, because I'll ride that wave of what you said about the change. Like one of the biggest things I find with my clients and the biggest issues in relationships is that idea when they get into relationship, partnership, whatever style they choose, but that person or even themselves are going to be the same tomorrow, that they're going to be the same 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. And then they're in this state of forgetting who they are, living half numb within this relationship. Like you said, because there's a deep love there.
Totally.
However, there's actually such a lack of, there's a lack of connection. And I find one of the simple pieces I share with people is like, every day, if you can just approach your partner and say, tell me something that's new about you today. Like actually invite in the conversation, right? Because even those conversations can be scary. How often do we think change is so scary? But if we step forward and invite it in as again, that celebration, you said, celebrating those moments of therapy, celebrating those edges, it becomes more enthusiasm and excitement. Like, oh God, I'm excited. Like, what's changed about you? Tell me, what can I learn new about you today? As a way that we can continue to evolve. So I love that thing, revolutionizing and the evolving relationship.
Yeah. Totally. I have a couple things I'd love to share with you, because as you were talking, I was thinking of some things, and I was writing some things down because there's so much synergy in this conversation, right? So we talked about this concept of growth, and then we talked about this concept of celebration, right? And this is the bread and butter, in my opinion, of what we should be situating our relationships in to begin with, right? The research shows that happily married couples are 5 times more positively acknowledging than unhappily married couples, right? So 5 times, not 4 times, not 3 times, not 2 times. So what we need to do is, I always say to my couples, if you want to keep me away from you, then start upping the ante with positive acknowledgement, because the truth is, right? I mean, I'm going to go circular in this talk, because we have so many different aspects here that are popping up. So if we start from the very beginning, right? We all grow up in family homes that were either amazingly fantastic or not so hot, and maybe even abusive or violent. And it's hard to grow up in any generation especially between the ages of 0 and 25, right? Because culture is constantly shifting in the world in a historical way, right? So if we're looking at society, and I touched on this a little bit last time in our last talk, but it's really important, and I'll go a little deeper since it's just you and I today. So we have this roadmap of history that as a world, we're constantly changing and shifting. We're shifting our politics, we're shifting our government system, we're shifting our parenting styles. Back then it was totally okay to hit a child when there was issues. Now it's not so much. So there's totally different paradigm shifts that happen from the one generation to the next generation, right? And now we're in the millennial era, right? So if we just take a look at how did we grow up? And I don't know about you, but for me, I can tell you for sure that I don't remember a lot of the things that happened in my youth. I suppressed almost half of it, I'm pretty sure, and some of it was not so great. And the things that were amazing, I do remember. But I think at a very early age, I can speak for myself, probably around 8 or 9 when I broke my arm and I fell down from monkey bars and I was in a hospital for 3 or 4 weeks. I was in traction. It was my first experience of trauma. And we have these moments, by the way, guys, and it's so subtle, where you have these moments where you experience these things and then you suppress them, because between the ages of 0 and 25, the brain development is just not there fully. It's just not there. It's just like it's like us as adults expecting a 4-year-old to self-soothe themselves at that point. They have to they have to learn it. They have to learn how to self-soothe. They have to learn how to communicate. And so I think about relationships in the same way, right? We have to learn how to walk together, right? We've learned how to walk our own path. Now, how do we walk together? We've figured out how to talk to ourselves, which, by the way, isn't so great all the time. A lot of our relationships, I can tell you for sure, when I first got married, I had inadequacy triggers. I did feel inadequate. I had confidence issues. I felt like an imposter a lot of the times. And a lot of that goes back to my own childhood trauma. And of course, my parents never meant or intended me to have this emotional experience in my life. Okay. I love my parents. They come over every weekend. It's not about getting into the story of blame. It's just about making contextual sense of what happened to you. How did you emotionally experience that? And then how did you become the person that you are today? And then how do we marry two people, right? How do we marry those two people? And the only way that we do that, in my opinion, is to figure out, where did they come from? Where did your partner come from? What kind of relationship did they have in their family? Did they communicate by yelling and screaming? Did they communicate by not talking about it at all? Right? These types of dynamics are where the special sauce is, guys. And if we can get into the special sauce, we can see things that you will never be able to unsee again. Once you see something so clearly, you can't unsee it. And we have to know our past in order to move forward in our history and become co-creators and start to really manifest and get embodied, right? You talked about embodiment, Tziporah. I'd love to hear your experience with your therapist, because I think embodiment work is so important, and it's not something that I learned when I was going through my program. It's something that's been around for a while, but it's become much more popular. And I've gotten into it myself in my own couples work, because I realized there's an experiential factor in couples work. There's a somatic, and body relationship and feeling relationship that happens in partnership that has nothing to do with theory, has nothing to do with change. And we have to feel it in our own bones, So I'd love to hear your perspective on your experience working with a somatic therapist, because I haven't worked with one. I do a lot of somatic practices, but I've never worked with one. And I love the idea of being able to take all the theory and everything and use the mind, but also use the body as well. especially sexuality for couples.
Oh yes, 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 yes. Um, okay, let me sit with this first. First, I want to jump to the listeners because I want to replay the announcement that if you're tuning in right now for you viewing, come on over to the Soulful Relating Institute with Zipporah and put in your questions because today we are taking your questions and answering them in the live feed. And for those of you who do choose to post your questions, you will get a free copy of my digital book of Revolutionizing Intimacy, but we'd love to take and answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to start with the childhood piece and then I'm going to go into the somatic piece.
Okay.
So I do find it's interesting because I do believe, and I have in my also experience with clients, but with myself as well, is I'm a geek when it comes to unpacking things, like
Yeah.
felt sense wise, because I'm just a very sensitive person and I feel a lot.
Yeah.
That's I've focused on developing that for 20 years, but it's I remember it actually just recently that my mom and I have been going into deeper conversations. My mom had a stroke about a year ago, and it just brought us closer together. And I've been asking her some really intense questions, and she started opening up about her
Mm.
marriage to my
Yeah.
father and
Yeah.
things that most likely took place for a lot of people in that era, and you just didn't
Absolutely.
talk about. And
Yeah.
and then I think of as well, like I don't remember some of my childhood, and then I start like it's fascinating for me. Then I thought, well, I was in the house when this took place, and where I go because I often go more to the somatic. It's like, oh yeah, so this is those moments that my body remembers, and so right, so we can be in a situation in a relationship, and it doesn't have to be romantic, but in a relationship and something might happen and you might have this complete you might just go off, you might have this trigger of
Yeah.
anxiety or anger and not have a clue logically where it's coming from, but it
Yeah.
is because our body is what's storing that memory, and so the body is going to react. And I find in relationships that impacts so much of their interaction, and they're really at a loss because logically they
Yeah.
don't know what's going on. They're like, we're doing everything right. And so my experience with somatics actually started with breath work. And so I was a lead trainer at the Transformational Breath Foundation, where
Awesome.
I literally took conscious connected breath work, and it's actually the foundation to my relationship work, because in that style of breath is we have found that we each have a conditioned breath pattern. And when we're able to one understand that breath pattern as a facilitator, as the space holder, but also as the person itself, like understanding your own pattern, is like it starts to give us exact information of the imprinting of what's going on in your relationship habits, because it's an exact mirror. It hasn't failed me to date. It is an exact mirror to the actions. And so I know, like when I work with my personally in my with my somatic therapist, specifically with couples, because I do also solo, but when if me and my partner are having a conversation in front of her, say we're just going through what's alive for us, she has this ability from across the room to track our body, the way our body
Yeah.
is moving, the tone of our voice, the way our body clenches. Like she knows if he says something and it
Hmm.
triggers an old response in my body memory, she knows instantly that I've just gone into that space. And she's
Got
just like,
it.
okay, what just happened? Like she's really good. she's and then when she comes and does hands-on work, it's so gentle. I'm going to share a specific process because I found it quite fascinating, and I think it would intrigue the viewers. So imagine going up to your client, and you might have done this as well before, and there's this exercise that you just go around and you gently place your
Hmm.
hand on their back. You're listening to all sorts of their breath, their body movement, the way they're viscerally what's happening, and you just put it there. And I remember these questions. It was just like, okay, so what happens in the body with that hand there? And so I share this with my clients. It's like, okay, so now that we've done this, it's going to do something to the nervous system. Now pay attention to what actually is happening. How is your body communicating to you? So for me, I remember going through a process and I'm just like, okay, interesting. Like, I don't want to lean into you. Like she asked, do you want to fall into me and be held? Do you want to run away? And I
Yeah.
just there, I'm just like, no, I don't want to lean into you, but I don't want you to go anywhere. I'm like, I
Beautiful.
just want you to sit right by my side and just be there with me. And when that came through me, it was such an aha, because I'm just like, I'm exactly like that in relationship. I don't need someone to fix me. I don't need someone to come and, console me. I want to know people are there. I want to know people are
Beautiful.
present.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a fascinating inquiry for any of the listeners, is like just like noticing what happens when you get touched and taking a moment. It's like, okay, so what is my body feeling? Simple physiological responses. What is it doing? And if I can go one step deeper into that, what is it actually telling me? Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love doing that work with couples. I think it's so beneficial for them to get to know themselves on that level, because a lot of us are not actually aware of our physiological bodies. Some of us don't realize that we're holding our breath a lot of the time. A lot of us don't realize that our body language is really closed when they're saying, I'm trying to be open here, but the other person is receiving the body language is closed, right? So body sculpting is probably something that you've done as well, really kind of situating the partners in the room and seeing them see themselves in their bodies. Johnson, I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but Sue Johnson did, and Satir and a couple of other people did body sculpting. And it's fascinating because if the couple comes in with a defensive posture and they don't know that they have one, you can actually situate the couple in the defensive posture in their bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the one person is like usually kind of scoffing or rolling their eyes, you would have them look up and just kind of, with their body like with crossed, and then the husband or the wife, he might be trying to get her to open up. So I would put him on his knees, trying to get him to open up, right? And so the polarity that gets built when they see themselves in that position, first of all, they realize, I don't want to be like this. Like, I don't want to intentionally choose this defensive posture, but I'm really triggered. And so that's when you get into the trigger work, right? And you start to figure out, okay, where are the triggers? What is it that you feel right now? Because couples get into a lot of story. I'm sure you're familiar with this too. They get into a lot of content, and content kills. It literally does. It will kill a conversation, an intimate conversation. If you're trying to debate and you're trying to be a lawyer and you're working for politics, totally different. I actually call it political platform arguing, right?
Wow.
So, it's like a Republican and a Democrat. They're sitting across from each other. And neither of them want to have sex with each other after, that's for sure, right? It's not like, oh yeah, I can't wait to have sex with you later. I just got reamed, a new one, right? So, and again, we do this because, early on, like let's say we have a trigger of not feeling adequate. A lot of the times what we'll do is we'll overcompensate with knowledge and details because we've learned to justify our feelings with facts. Like our feelings weren't enough, okay? And if there's one thing that the people take away today, I'm really hoping that everyone that's watching, it's that your emotion doesn't need a justification. It doesn't need to be justified. There does not need to be a story or a reason or a why. And I see my couples get into these stories and these reasons and these whys because they were taught very early on, not knowing that they had to justify, well, why do you feel like that? I mean, my father still does it today. My mom still does it today because they don't know how to hold space. They haven't learned how to do it. I'm teaching them slowly, but they don't know how to hold space for someone. And the idea of holding space is like, what is that? Right? Well, that means literally holding them, in their feelings, and saying it's okay that you feel this way. and then coming to some type of resolution or compromise or situation that might benefit you and me, because I believe both parties can truly find a way to feel fulfilled in their relationship without compromising or sacrificing themselves, right? But going back to that somatic work that you were talking about, I love doing that stuff, And then afterwards, when we do that modeling work that you're talking about, which is modeling and physiologically checking in with the body, I have both of the partners sit down Indian style. I get a nice comfy pillow and I put them Indian style, and I have them look at each other, and I just not higher than the other. They're just kind of sitting down. And I said, this is what it should feel like in your body when you're talking, right? This is what we're aiming for, to look eye to eye, to take a deep breath in, right? And I just have them breathe together and learn to settle in for when they're doing their repair talk after a trigger, So it's the most amazing work. I love the embodied work. I wasn't taught it, by the way. It wasn't something that you learn in academics, except for Sue Johnson's work a little bit, but you really have to do it to feel it. You have to feel it. And then when you do it, you're like, oh, get it,
Yes. Oh goodness. Okay. I got to look at my notes. This is such a rich conversation.
Yeah, it really is. I'm having fun.
We might go on for hours. No. So I love the presencing idea and what you said, like when you sat, after the body sculpting, after getting them more present in their body, sitting them in front of each other just to be with each other. And I do find that that's such a piece, like everything you're saying, like it's something we're not taught. We're taught to achieve goals, to strive, and we're not taught to feel, but we're not even taught how to be present. And even so often we say it. I remember a client of mine saying, he had worked with me for 3 months, and at the close, like he had no clue what was going on. He was such a trooper. He was just like, I have no clue what you're doing, but it feels really good and it's helping. I'm just going to go with it. I mean, such an open-minded person. But at the very end, he was a professional surfer, and he practiced yoga. So he'd go to yoga class, but he made this comment to me, and he's just like, I have been hearing yoga teachers for years say, be present. And yet it always came from their mind. He's like, I never really felt or understood what they're talking about. He's like, today is the first day I actually feel what present means in the body. And I think if we can teach, if we can bring people into the space and hold a space for them to, I get goosebumps. What comes to me, right, is to feel safe enough. Because I find like what I'm getting is like we're not present because we don't know how, but we don't feel safe enough in our nervous system because our entire life story. And so if we can just hold that space for these humans to feel safe enough to be able to explore becoming more present in their body, to me, that is foundation for these revolutionary relationships. That is foundation to everything else, any other problems we might have or issues or challenges in relationship. Like when we can be present, one of the processes that I use, I'm sure you've done this or heard of this, the dyadic integration. And specifically a process that I do also a lot in groups. It's called the power of deep listening. And so they'll go through this whole cyclic conscious connected breath work for a good 10 to 15 minutes in order to bring them more into a felt sense, like really open up their bodies and their soma. But then they'll partner up, and the process is you simply sit across each other. You find stillness, and one person asks, tell me something you want me to know.
Love it.
And the other person, their work, so to speak, in it is their role is to not do anything but listen. And that means no nodding the head, no smiling, right? No smiling, nothing that's going to approve what the other person's saying, because it's offering a couple things. One, it's giving them an experience of identifying where they might sabotage their communication by going into their own story. right? Of wanting to compare.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or it also, it allows the other person who's speaking a space to maybe integrate some of their own emotional components that's going on inside of them without the other person having to fix it. I'll give one example. Like
Exactly.
if we're in a group or we're with someone who tends to use humor as a way to
Mm-hmm.
avoiding vulnerability. If I'm in a space and someone starts telling a joke and I join them and start laughing, I'm actually interrupting their process.
Right.
So when I can just sit back and allow, so I love having couples go into this one, they're supporting each other in their integration by just being present, but also that gift, right? Like you mentioned, of just being able to express feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I get so aroused when my partner just sits there and here's what I'm feeling without needing to explain it, without needing to fix it, without needing to debate about it or explain it. Because I love geeking out about what I'm feeling. Like I'm just like, I sometimes vomit it out. And it's such a turn on. So I'd like to kind of take this conversation, everything we're talking about, and apply it now to how it, from your view, how it does affect the turn on, the arousal, because I find it just amplifies the arousal because you're soothing the nervous system along the way. So I'd love you to jump in on that if you feel called.
Yeah, I'd love to. This conversation's so fun. I love how deep it's going. It's really good. I'm like, let's go deeper, you know? Okay, so one of the things that, well, there's a couple things. First of all, I love the physiological self-soothing, and then the keeping the presence, like you mentioned. And I actually started learning how to do sound healing at my practice because I started to notice how physiologically aroused, not sexually, but anxiety, my couples were coming in as. And so to self-regulate them, I do that, but I like the idea of doing it for 15 minutes and really getting them in their bodies and then sitting them up, tell me something you want to know. I do something a little similar. It's 3 questions, and I figured I'd share it because, it might be a new tool because I got a new tool for my toolbox, right? I love listening and talking to other couple specialists because I get to learn new things too, So for me, the first question is it's a stream of consciousness exercise. Okay. Have you ever heard of a stream of consciousness exercise? Okay, so they're looking at each other in the eyes and they're not really breaking eye contact and they're just kind of breathing in, breathing out, right? As they're self-regulating. The first question is, what is love? And the other person on the other side of that is just going to sit there and give one-word answers. So it goes, what is love? And the other person answers. And the other person says, what is love? And the other person answers. And what my couples find is actually the same thing that you're talking about. They notice, are they giggling? Is it uncomfortable? Is the eye contact weird? They learn a lot about themselves. They learn a lot about themselves in this exercise. And it's amazing. And then the next question is, what is giving? And then the next question is, what is taking? And the last question is, how can I love you? And you might have had an argument before you came into the office, before you sat down to work with your person, right? And you might have been caught up in the details and all that stuff, but I find that as soon as they start doing this exercise, they're able to really understand what their partner's feeling, right? Just by asking, what is love? What is giving? How can I love you? Right? You can really repair a relationship like that. And especially if there was a trigger. Of course, there's other ways to do it. But if you want to do somatic work and you want to do body work and breath work, that's a great way to do it. Right? And the other person is just supposed to sit there and just listen, not think about what they're going to say or how they're going to debate it. They're just sitting there and they're listening and they're holding the presence. And some of my couples, it's the first time they've ever experienced that type of presence from their partners. So I wanted to speak into that too. And then the other thing that you brought up, that was about listening. And I always say this to my couples. I'm like, you guys think sex is important. And
Mhm.
it is, it's a big thing in a relationship, right? You can't do it with anyone else. You only got to do it with your partner. Of course, you can do, have fun parties every once in a while, whatever you do in your sex life, right? But, if you're married and you're living in a monogamous relationship, sex becomes important, sex and passion becomes important. But what gets you to the bedroom is not being hot and bothered all the time. It's not, oh my God, you're so physically attractive and let's get into the bed. Even though I'm sure your partner's hot and so is mine. It's all good, right? That's why we like them. But in a long-term relationship, when you're talking 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years with someone, intimacy, listening to your partner and having intimate conversation is sexuality. It's the foreplay to the bedroom. That's what I like to say. It's the foreplay to the bedroom. And every time I do that, the men are like, oh, I'm in, of course I want more sex. Right. And some ladies really enjoy it also, but they don't realize, I think what couples are missing, and I missed it in my relationship too. I mean, all the stuff I'm talking about, by the way, I've learned and I've applied to my relationship. I didn't start like that, and I'm still evolving. My husband and I are taking a tantric sexuality course right now, because we're always doing fun things together and we love doing it. And that's why I'm saying it can be fun. It can be fun. It doesn't have to be that surviving, or only doing it when you need to be proactive for something. Make it a part of your relationship. But, to your point is, I think that emotional intimacy and communication is the foreplay to the bedroom. I really do. So that's my offering for right now.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that. I'm a hell yes to that. Yes.
Yes. It's super hot. Like she said, it's a turn on.
It is a turn on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Communication itself is like, if we can, I find for me, it's just this constant evolution. I just want to learn more. I want to learn more. And I love what you spoke about at the very beginning. I believe it was at the beginning of our call today, about the acknowledgement of the other.
Yeah.
How simple is that? When we get caught up in our fight and our struggles, like, can we acknowledge each other daily? And how that is also, right, that the foreplay all the time.
All
Foreplay
of
is
it is foreplay.
24/7. So
Exactly.
yeah. So I'm going to share a piece, and then I would like to pass it on to you for us to start sharing a few practices, a little bit more practices. I know we've been sharing.
Yeah.
My assistant is typing some in the comments for people, and then we're going to prepare to come to a close soon. But so I'm going to feed off of that acknowledgement piece. So one of the simple practices that I invite people into, I do it myself as well, is called the appreciation shower. And you may have heard this. It's where, again, it's this whole, I think there's a theme here that you're sitting across from your partner. You can do this with friends as well. You can do this with family members, but you're sitting across, you're taking a time when you're present, when you're calm in your body, and you're literally just showering them with everything you appreciate about them.
I
You
love
can
it.
do it. I usually do it two ways. It's either one person sits for, say, like 5 minutes, and because someone might be really uncomfortable with receiving compliments.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
right. But you're literally just showering with everything that you appreciate about them. Or
Mm-hmm.
the other is we alternate. So you say one appreciation. You might set a timer for, say, 40 minutes. And then one person says an appreciation, and then you alternate back and forth for 40 minutes. And what I have found is, at first, the appreciation is, it's very superficial. It's at the top, like something that's very obvious. But once we get to that 45-minute marker, you're starting to identify appreciations that you never knew you had about your partner. And that itself, I find, is just such a saving grace in creating this closeness, especially if there's been an argument, or people have been traveling and they've been apart, or hey, maybe you're social distancing right now in separate homes.
Yeah.
Can you do a process like this on video, on Zoom, anything that creates some form of connection? So that's my process, my exercise I want them to take away today. What is some type of practice that they could do, whether they're together or on video?
Yeah, I love it. Well, I actually wanted to speak into something right before I give my intimacy exercise that I give my couples all the time. And it was on this concept of, we were talking about communication, we were talking about listening, we were talking about acknowledgement. And just to tie in the whole conversation that we had today, if you don't mind me doing so, there's three really important elements that you want to make sure that you do in a relationship. You want to make sure that you guys know how to repair, right? You want to make sure that you guys are increasing your acknowledgments, right? Research shows happily married couples are 5 times more positively acknowledging for a reason. And a lot of the blocks, I think that, and keep me on track because I want to talk about sacred sexuality in just a second, but and building polarity in the relationship, because what we're really talking about is building sexual polarity, and this is like the sacred sexuality that most couples want to get to, right? Let's face it, we want to have a sacred sexual partnership, and most people are like, well, how do you do that, right? So going back to these 3 components, you want to make sure that you're repairing, meaning you're repairing the emotional connection, not getting into the content of it, but the emotional connection. Number 2, increasing those acknowledgments. And I was going to say, this is, I'm a divergent thinker here. When it comes to increasing appreciations, a lot of my couples tell me, well, he's going to get a big head. Well, she's going to get a big head. They already think that they're amazing, And the truth is that even if your partner thinks they're amazing, they do have insecurities as well, right? They have their moments just like you that they don't feel so hot about themselves. And maybe, have you ever thought about the fact that maybe they're showing themselves in this egotistical way because they do feel inadequate on some level, much, much deeper. So we neglect to acknowledge because we think it's not important. And the thing is, guys, all of it is important. Every single element of it, the way that you guys handle the home, how you parent your children, how you guys interact with each other in every way, and acknowledging each other on all of those fronts, right? The parenting front. Thank you so much for going to the grocery store. The little things. Thank you so much for cleaning out the backyard. A lot of my couples miss those moments of dropping in and saying, hey, honey, I really appreciate this. And what I'd like to encourage everyone to do is right before they go to bed, and I have another one too, I have 2, right before they go to bed, have a conversation, just a small conversation. Tell your partner 3 things that you really love and appreciate about them today. Not in general, but 3 things that you really love that they did for you, how they supported you. Maybe it's about how they look so beautiful. It could be anything, right? And then your partner gives 3, and then you go to sleep, you give each other a kiss. Maybe you make love, right? Because you're feeling all lovey-dovey now because somebody said something nice to you before you went to bed. Isn't that the best way to go to bed, right? So I encourage that, and do it every night. My husband and I do it naturally now. I mean, at first it was like, all right, let's try this practice out. And now we're almost every night, unless someone passes out, we're doing it, And then the other piece here, I'm going to talk about this intimacy ritual that my husband and I do once a week, and my couples do it once a week as well. But right before that was this piece of sacred sexuality kept popping up in our conversation. But what her and I are talking about right now is building a sacred sexual relationship, an intimate relationship. That's what it is. Sacred sexuality actually has less to do with genitals and orgasms than most people think. It has to do with the emotional reciprocity, the spiritual reciprocity that brings the energetic polarity of the feminine and the masculine, even if you're in a same-sex partnership. In a heterosexual partnership, it doesn't matter. There's polarity building because women could be masculine and feminine, and men could be masculine and feminine. And it doesn't mean that you're a girl being feminine. It means I am holding space. It means I am listening, right? I'm listening. I'm being the experiencer. That for me is like the masculine energy, holding space. The feminine is the emotional experiencer, right? And both you and your partner are going to drop in and out of that. But that's the polarity building that you guys can be doing in your relationship. A great question is, what do you love about my feminine, right? Well, what do you love about my masculine? And ask your partner these questions. because I mean, Paul and I, we drop in on those questions at least once a month. And some of the things that he comes up with, I'm like, wow, I didn't even know you like that. You know, I wore a dress one day and it happened to be a color, a specific color. And he's like, I just love that dress on you, you know, and he said it that day, but I didn't realize that it was something that he enjoyed that much. You know what I'm saying? Ritual, and this is something you can do once a week, okay, is ask your partner, and it's a holding space. Grab some tea, you know, grab some water, whatever you drink, wine, not too much wine, right? And you ask, you know, what are you celebrating, right, to your partner? And your job is to just listen and be present. What are you celebrating? And the reason why, because we're wrapping up this whole call literally to Tziporah on growth and celebration. Celebrate the wins, because guys, the only thing that we remember in life is when we celebrate. Otherwise, it just seems like one big line of things, you know, that we do. We get up, we brush our teeth, we go to the bathroom, we do our fun stuff, but we need to learn to celebrate more, because that demarcates something that felt special that we're going to remember. And so I recommend saying, what are you celebrating this week, honey? What are you celebrating this week? The next question is, what are you feeling challenged with this week? And you're just listening, maybe even doing some active listening, like, oh, okay, so what you're saying is that you went this way and this happened. Oh my God, that's crazy. I can't believe that happened to you, right? Just holding space and doing active listening, not responding, but just listening, right? And this is going to give you, especially if you're really wanting to be a better listener for your partner, this is a good exercise. And all you have to do is just take a deep breath in and listen to what they have to say. And then they'll listen to you, right? And the last question is, how can I support you next week? And the reason why I love that question for my couples are because most couples, you know, have children, or they're, you know, have heavy careers, or both. And, you know, they don't often get to drop in with each other. Actually, the national average, research shows the national average for couples that have quality time is actually 30 minutes. That's it. 30 minutes is the national average. And so guess what? This is when my couples are dropping in during those 30 minutes, right, a week. And they have something that they can now do together. Instead of just getting together and talking about what the kids did or what happened at work, you're going a little deeper, because when you're talking about what you're celebrating, that's deeper. When you're talking about your challenges, that's deeper. You're dropping into another layer that you and your partner might not often go to naturally.
Yeah. Oh, so well said. Thank you. Wow. So, and all of that, like what I'm hearing and taking away and offering is this cultivating of quality time, and all these practices and ideas and components that we're speaking into today is just like time to drop into deeper quality time, because that's going to be a bridge for building the relationship. So I love that. I love this conversation.
Me
Eva,
too.
where can people find you? My assistant's going to type this into the comments right now, so people can make sure to check you out.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, you guys can find me. Well, first of all, my website is relationshiprevolutionaries.com. My Instagram handle, which I would love some love over there. I'm building my page. I've been on Facebook forever, but I'm starting to, you know, really create a brand over on Instagram. So I'd love for you guys to come check me out over there. I post daily. I post activities. I post rituals. I mean, I'm not just posting, you know, hashtags, you know. So if you guys want to find me there, it's at the couples doctor. So the underscore couples, the underscore doctor, right? So there's 2 underscores in between the words. And then my group, my Relationship Revolutionaries tribe, my Thrive tribe is what I call them. And they're over at the Relationship Revolutionaries Facebook group. So you can literally just put the same word in for almost all of it, except for Instagram. And so it's the underscore couples and then underscore doctor, but I probably should change it. The underscores are so annoying, right? And then for sure, if you guys want to work on your relationship, we do have a 90-day renew and restore program. So if you would like to learn how to do all the ins and outs of what we're talking about, I've built a master program. It took me 3 years to put it all together. And I just added the somatic aspect of it to the 90 days, which is really cool that we've been talking about about it today. And I did some intimacy exercises and also some sound healing meditations to help the couples move through the entire program. So if you guys would like some information on that, we're running a sale over the next month as long as COVID-19 is around. We're trying to support couples because the domestic violence is up to like 56% right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrible, so I want to support them. So yeah.
And can they find out about the program on your website, Eva?
Yes. Yeah. And
Great.
They can also just email me. I'm friendly. couplesseekingsolutions@gmail.com.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for this very enriching, it definitely was enriching
Yeah.
for me, for my heart and soul
Thank you.
conversation today. And thank you all for joining the conversation. And if you want to stay in touch as we move forward, the Elevate series now will be running on Tuesdays and Fridays at 3 p.m. For those of you who are interested in diving deeper, I will be launching, we kick off the Mastery of Connection, Living in Authentic Intimacy starting next Wednesday, actually.
Awesome.
It's turned into a wonderful international online group, so we're excited to start that. Yay! And you can come on over to my website to pick up my book, Revolutionizing Intimacy. But until then, we look forward to next time. Take care.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.